I agree. I think that's
People,
definitely the case.
people just they want really quick, immediate gratification, and they're not interested in really thinking about subjects deeply, you know. And we've this will probably start lead us into a conversation, but for thousands of years, as we've spoken before, people have been trying to get the same message across to everyone, and it just doesn't seem to. It's like it just falls on deaf ears, or
But I think the concept that gets the problem. I don't really mean it's a problem in that sense, but it's the issue of the concept of getting it across to everyone. And it's exactly like you've just said. The audience for any message, any particular viewpoint, anything deep and meaningful is always going to be smaller than the audience to watch someone face palmed into a custard pie. And I think that, obviously it's sort of a big discussion, but I think when we've talked about this one kindness message, and that concept of sharing niceness, good values, all of that, it's not ever going to be an everyone situation. And it's even within the everyone, there's going to be different sort of Venn bits of the group. Some want to see it one way, some another, and some another. Even within that, that's
why do you think that is? Do you think there's a reason?
it's a really great question. My guess would be it's in significant part cultural. I think so. I think the way that people were raised, and even if they, in terms of their nationality and their religion and their
So
creed,
it's nurture, not nature, you think?
I definitely think it's majority nurture, but I always think nature has something to do with it. I think some people just intrinsically won't be interested. It's like, I mean, as in my sort of my day job as a training manager, there are people who want to learn and develop, and there are people who just want to come and do a job and go home. And that's nature rather than nurture. And I think it's the same here. Some people will want to know, and some people just don't. So I think there's elements of both, but I suspect the biggest reason will be how people are brought up. Because even if you go into your adult life, sorry, I'm doing an awful lot of talking here. If you do going into your adult life, even without the faith that you may have been raised in or the creeds that you grew up with or whatever it happens to be, I think they're still intrinsically in there. And I suspect that still drives a lot of your thinking, even if you're not actively
Oh
involved
yeah.
in a system.
There's a big school of thought about childhood traumas, and I don't get me wrong. I don't think they don't have a place, but I think that there comes a point where you can't just keep blaming everything on stuff that happened to you when you were a child, because although they do mold your character, because we're a product of all of our experiences. But I think if you keep saying, "Oh, I'm behave like this because X happened to me when I was such and such an age, or Daddy smacked me," or whatever the awful thing is, then you're always giving yourself a way out for your behaviour. I think, as an adult, you need to accept responsibility that you are the one in control. There was a time when you weren't so much in control because your parents would tell you what to do. You're born into a family, like, as you know, we're plant-based, but we were all born into being meat eaters. You don't get a choice with that. And people one of the arguments they tend to give you as a vegan is, but you're not giving the kids a choice. But no child gets a choice. You're born into a family and you behave how the family behaves.
Yeah.
That's, if your way you're behaving is outside the scope of what the family has decided is right or wrong, their own belief system, then you'll be told off for that. As there another family, it might be okay.
Yeah. But I think that, yeah, no, I completely agree. And I do personally completely agree with the fact that as a grown up, well, a better phrase, but as an older person, let's say, I'm not sure I ever want to grow up, but as an older person, there's definitely the fact that, as I know, that the choices I make are my own and they're not something I can keep making excuses for based on whatever's happened. However, that's partly because we know you can think like that and should, I suppose, should's a strong word, have the choice to think like that. And that's because we're somewhat educated like this. But there are plenty of people who just don't know they have a choice.
Yeah, and this is
why
going to
there's so many different forms. Sorry, go on, you talk.
No, this is going to get us into a conversation because we're slowly edging ourselves into it. So, what is your, just quickly, if you don't mind saying, what is your religious stance?
Oh, it's a good question.
I know you go to church. Do you believe in God? Or
I definitely believe in a higher power. I absolutely believe in higher power, angels, things like that, in the sense of Fundamentally, I would hate to think that mankind is the most intelligent thing in this whole universe. I think it would frustrate me greatly when we look at the sort of stuff we're capable of in our mass stupidity, even if
I
individually.
don't think there is a mass
Smart.
stupidity.
Oh, I know we differ on this. I
We
mean,
do,
park
yeah.
that for a minute because
Yeah,
I
we'll
know
park that. We'll park that. Yeah.
your actual question is right. So I was born and raised in a Jewish cultural environment personally, but
Yeah.
it was semi-observant. So we do things like observe the holidays, but it was in no way orthodox. And across the years, I've had lots of stuff to do with spirituality. For instance, I do Reiki treatments. I actually got my tarot cards out yesterday, which was an interesting one to start doing some work
Yeah,
around.
that's what really interested me about you, because I know that you go to church, and then I seen that you're into all this sort of
So
I don't know how you would describe it, a little bit mystical. Some people would, maybe towards some of the paganism, but
yeah, I think
church
I think
has adopted a lot of the pagan ways as well.
I totally agree. It was the only way to get the religion
Part of the
out there en
manipulation,
masse.
wasn't it?
Yeah. I think if I'm blunt for the purpose of this, church is for a couple of reasons. One is because up here in Bolton, there is no Jewish community, so we don't have the option to take the girls. Although we've got things like Prestwich and Whitefield down the road, but they are very orthodox communities, and there's no point in shoving that down the throats because Jules is Church of England in her culture, and like me, she's not very active. The other reason is that the limited choices we have around secondary schools require, in the best options, church attendance, and that fundamentally is a great reason. Don't get me wrong, when I'm in church, I feel a vague connection to the bigger power. Yeah. I mean, but our church is a very modern one, it's Pentecostal and da 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 da. But you're right, I think the closest that I would describe myself, if it was to anything, would be modern pagans, probably the closest, or just spiritual. I have faith, but I don't necessarily believe, I definitely don't believe in organized religion.
The message is always good with religion. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot, if not nearly all, of churches and places of worship have been built on ley lines.
I presume that was the case.
A lot of people have proved that, and that's why I think, apart from the fact so many humans have been in there and unloaded an energy into that building, which, whether you know it or not, you'll be picking up on when you go in there, just on a instinctive level. And if it's built on ley lines of the planet as well, you're going to pick up on that energy. But so, especially sort of Christianity, the whole thing around God, they've always said, like, they give us humans were given a choice.
Yeah.
We were given a choice to be this way or that way. And so the purpose of this talk was kind of the duality of being a human. And what I meant by that, you might have taken it completely differently, but what I meant by that was you've got like animalistic, instinctive things about you. And then you've got the whole mindset of being a human, where you're able to contemplate and decide what's right and wrong, because nature doesn't have a right and wrong. Nature just does nature. If a leopard is waiting on the side of the water to catch a creature that's on the water, and a crocodile takes it, and it all kills each other, nature doesn't blink an eyelid, because there's no right or wrong there. That's just nature. But we, as human beings, we can contemplate what we decided is a good and a bad way to behave. But you have all these. So again, in religion, so one of the things I wanted to say was they talk about having a choice, and I think that's what it's about. You can choose to behave this way or behave that way. You can choose to do a good thing, do a bad thing. You don't need to run on instincts. And then in religions, they always talk about making the two one. And a lot of people are confused by what that means. And my own interpretation of that is that you've got to bring the animalistic base emotions together with your higher emotions of intelligence. And one of them has to be in power. You have to decide what road you're going down. But you can't get rid of either of them. It's part of your intrinsic nature as a human being to have anger and aggression and depression and emotional reactions to things. But at the same time, you can be really compassionate, and you can feel sorrow, and you can have patience. But these things are quite an opposite to each other. which is a very strange thing about humans. We have two different sets of beings which actually oppose each other. And that's, I think, why they talk about pain when you're trying to make the two one. And like I was talking to you about, when you're trying to pull away from this negative vibration into a higher vibration, more compassionate vibration, you feel like you're being drawn back. It's really hard to explain. And that to me also gives some explanation why people say, oh, you've got demons inside you. There's evil angels or spirits or something inside you, and all these negative things are evil. And it's actually entities. A lot of people believe that's entities residing in you, and all these other things are good. But I think personally, I think they're just all part of being a human. And what you need to do, so I'm writing a book actually, and in my book, it's more like an instruction manual. It's kind of an ongoing thing. But imagine in your mind, I've got two ways of explaining it. I'll explain the first way, which I'm not sure if I'm going to alter it yet, because I've thought of a better way, I think. Imagine you've got a tool shed in your mind. It's got all your tools in there. These tools are not tools as they would be on the outside there, your emotions and your states of being. And you want to hang up all your negative stuff because it's heavy. You don't want to have that hanging on your personality all the time. It's really heavy, draws you down, as you should probably know. And then you've got all the stuff that you want to use on a daily basis, like patience, compassion and joy, and having a good state of mind. But you cannot rid yourself of all the negatives and powerful, what we would say are more negative forces. You can't rid yourself of them, because a lot of literature says, oh, you must squash this, you must throw them out, you must kill them, you must disperse them from your system. But that's absolutely impossible. I don't believe you can do that. But what you can do is you can pick them up, because God forbid that you might sometimes need to be aggressive and angry. It's possible. You might find yourself in a situation where you can't just go, I'm going to be so compassionate and feel sorrow for this person while they're pounding your head in. That's the time when you need to pick up some of them more negative tools and use them. But then you need to put them down. Or a new way that I thought about it, which came about me today, was think of them more as, so I think of the being as you are your God. And if you actually look at literature and the scriptures and you interpret them, they are saying that we are God to ourselves, yeah? And God is within you. You are the God to your own being. Heaven is within you. Jesus even said at one point, I'm saying to you, yes, you are all gods. And that was apparently one of his actual statements. Again, we don't know how many of the statements that you read about Jesus are true or not, but he's not the only person to have said it. Pythagoras and Buddha, they were all saying, don't look to the sky, heaven is in you. And Jesus said, one of his sayings was, if they say to you, heaven is in the sky, then the birds are there before you, and them sort of things. So you are God unto your own being, and as much as you can say what happens and what doesn't happen, and that would be God's position. God would be able to say, no, that's not happening. And if you think of your negative emotions as more, say, companion animals, right, that are less intelligent than you, and you can control them through training. So somebody does something that really bugs you, immediately instincts kick in. You want to get aggressive, maybe not like in a really violent way, but you feel annoyed. You feel some sort of knee-jerk reaction. Then that's when the human side comes in and says, no, sit down, take a seat. I tell you when you kick off and when you don't kick off. And this is not the time. So go and sit down. You need to control them. Do you see what I mean? Because when you say to your legs and your mind, jump, they don't argue with you, do they? You jump. So why should your mind argue with you when you say in your mind to do something? And I believe the reason is no one is trained how to do this. No one is getting trained how to control their mind. It's just running amok, like they call it monkey mind or wild horses. And it's just boxing away all bloody day.
So if you don't mind me interrupting, that's something I was going to say was, and I think you have, because I think we've talked about it before, but Steve Peters wrote a book called The Chimp Paradox.
Yeah, I've heard
and
of
the
it.
chimp paradox is exactly what you're describing. It's the fact that the chimp mind is the nature mind, the one that's you know, nature does nature, as you say, and it's that bit of us that was A, built for danger protection, and B, is so instinctive that we can't stop it most of the time until after it's already done its job. So that training comes in when we get the chimp and we put it in its cage and we give it a banana and we tell it to calm the hell down, you
Yeah,
know,
it's
and
just
it,
another way of explaining the same
right,
thing. Yeah.
yeah. So it's absolutely, I agree with what you're saying. It's definitely in line with lots of current thinking. But the one thing I was noticing was every time you talk about the emotions, and you kind of changed it towards the end, and you were saying that they're, you know, negative emotions, heavy emotions, hanging up the ones, which is true when you look at them purely as if you take a good bad binary position. But the reality is those emotions are just part of you, and there's a particular therapy. I mean, I'm going through it now. You know, I'm going through some
I
stuff.
said
And,
that. I agree
yeah,
with you there. They are part of you.
yeah, but they're not necessarily bad or good. They're neutral because they just exist. But the act. So, I mean, for me, the act
Yeah,
therapy that I'm going through, I'm nearly done anyway. But the act
No,
therapy
no, you took.
is all around. So it's half of it is acceptance and half of it is commitment. So the acceptance side is life is hard, life is painful, but it doesn't have to be suffering. Whereas for the majority of people, they get the pain and they suffer.
Yeah.
So if we just accept those emotions,
there's definitely going to be pain. That's inevitable,
yeah,
but suffering
but
is optional.
right, but most people do both. They see one and feel the other, and don't realise there's a choice.
Yeah.
The commitment stuff is, what are my values? What do I actually believe in? And let's move towards that. But the reason I'm pointing it out is coming back to making the choice to hang up the tools, which I think is a great analogy, and use the ones I want, you know, run with the ones I want to do and be. Why then, and I include myself in this, why then do we choose when we can do something that will take us towards what we want or away from what we want? Why would we sometimes choose to do the away one when we don't have
Well,
to?
exactly like I said to you.
And that's something I suffer with greatly at the moment.
The man next door, I was talking to him.
Together.
I get you, man. I'm on it all the time. It's turmoil. It's internal turmoil. Sometimes I'm awake at an hour in the night, like fighting with, because I'm pushing it out in my consciousness now. So when I'm conscious, and I mean by awake, when I'm saying conscious, right? I'm conscious, I'm awake, and I'm in control. And even then I struggle. But the days I don't, when I'm unconscious and I'm asleep, that shit comes creeping into my dreams, man. And it's the only way it can get in. And I'll have the shittiest dreams you can imagine. And I wake up feeling like crap, or I wake up in the middle of the night and have all this nonsense going on. So it doesn't want to let go. It's had a cushy life for decades.
That's exactly what it comes down to. Yeah.
It's almost like when people say it's a demon, I can totally get it, but I don't believe it is that.
No, I'm with you. I think it's just a part of your brain. I mean, the brain is you know, so incredibly
but it doesn't need to
complex.
It doesn't need to be.
But it's if you you know, for me, when I've just realised I've got a COVID jab in about 20 minutes. I'm going to go fairly soon at 3, if that's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely happy to carry this on as and when and whenever. But what I was going to say was that for me at the moment, with the combination of the medication and the stuff that neurons and synapses that are all not behaving themselves, consciously I can't turn off. I'm not choosing enough to turn off the things that aren't benefiting me. I'm still making away from moves.
That's down to you, isn't it?
It is absolutely 100%, but they're not choices that I feel in control of sufficiently to make them the sensible way. Even though, if I look at it purely objectively, of course I am. And that's what does my head in the most at the moment.
So the guy next door I want to tell about, he suffers from lust. He's really lustful. He's like he talked about prostitutes and stuff. He's proper like he suffers with lust, and he said, but that's his whole part. Look at the armies that have gone in and raped all the women. It's part of our being, like you're saying, you know, as part of us. It's not good or bad. And I'm like, but you don't need to suffer lust. You don't need to suffer anger. You don't. What that comes down to is it's going to hurt. Now, if I take you and try to train your physique, it's not going to be nice. You're not going to enjoy it. It's going to hurt. Why do you think your mind should be any different? You need to suffer the pain. You can't say, oh, it's just part of my being. No.
I need to suffer the pain. I don't need to suffer it. I need to accept it, but remember why I'm doing it. If my why is big enough, then it's not going to be suffering.
Oh, no. You will suffer. You will. And through all suffering comes enlightenment. From the end of suffering is growth. Every scripture will tell me that. Every religious organization talks about suffering. The suffering is fine. There's two mistakes you can make. One is not beginning, and two is giving up just because it hurts. And that's what I see in training as well. People
Yeah.
go, oh, it's painful. I shouldn't be in this pain. No, you should be. That's how you grow. You're
Yeah,
in the pain because
yeah.
you've sat in that side too long. You've got fat, you've eaten crap. Now you need to go through pain to get out of it. You've sat in the negative mindset for too long. Now you're going to have to go pain to get out of it. I'm going through a lot of pain. I'm not saying I'm great at it. I struggle. Sometimes I want to give up. I really do.
Sorry, I kept talking over you and I shouldn't have done that. But I think there is a massive distinction that we're not yet sufficiently agreed on between pain and suffering. Because I completely agree on all the pain stuff. I completely agree that, you know, taking on a new sport.
Can I just really interject really quickly?
Yeah.
Suffering can be short-term or suffering can be long-term. I'm talking about short-term suffering.
Okay.
I'm not talking about suffering a long, long time, like, oh, your whole life I must suffer forever. I'm just talking about you have to suffer on the short term.
Okay, well, I buy that quite happily. I think, though, in terms of the scriptural side on suffering, I was thinking about the book of Job, where Job gets completely stiffed by God the whole way through, gets everything wrecked. Never does he curse God for it. At the end, he gets everything back again because he behaved himself, but there's no real growth in it. And I don't see in that he ever got anything out of it. God and the devil did, you know, they got their argument about whether he could, you know, destroy
you can't live in Job to know what he got out of it. See, like,
That's
you'll
true.
never know
That's
what's going on in my mind, and you'll never know how I feel. Likewise, you can tell me what you like about you, but I'll never know you, and you will never know me, and you can never know another man or another person for that matter.
No.
And you said earlier that you don't think that they're good or bad. The fact that you're a human means that things are good or bad.
I'm talking specifically on the good or bad thing about the purely animalistic stuff. So you said depression in that list. I think depression is a human trait rather than an animal trait. I've never seen a depressed cat.
Oh,
you know?
probably.
So I think if we
have a look at the animals that are locked in zoos and tell me they're not depressed.
I will stand completely corrected. All right, yeah, okay.
Things are mentally disturbed.
Yeah, all right. I take my point and rescind it because you make a great point. But what I'm talking about is the instinctual stuff. I think that there's an element of nuance here, and I'm not trying to negate what you're saying.
We're talking.
But in terms of what we experience, I think we absolutely assign values to them being good or bad. I assign depression, clinical depression, or misery or whatever as being a bad thing. I assign anger in a firm way to gain an end as potentially being a reasonable thing, but uncontrolled rage I would consider a bad thing. Lust I would consider possibly a good thing in certain circumstances, but not in general. And But they're my values, obviously.
See, I don't think you should give any energy. So everything needs to be fed, whether it's whatever it is. And I know you've got to go, so we'll finish up real in a second. And when you give them attention, you feed them your energy, your attention. So if you're angry over what essentially is nothing, you're feeding your anger when it doesn't need to be fed. You want to keep that sort of thing hungry so that when you need it, you can really use it. Do you know what I mean? And Jesus and wasn't just him, Buddha, and I think Pythagoras said that when you commit something in your mind, then you've literally already committed it because you've fed it. So if you're looking at a woman lustfully, you just cheated on your missus. You know, if you're thinking a bad thought about someone, then you've literally just slighted them because you've lived that. The mind doesn't know that. It's another whole subject we get into. The mind doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination. That's why you can get horny when you can imagine something. For a really crude example,
it's a good one.
It relies on the eyes and the mind and the senses to give it information. So if you lie to it, it doesn't know the difference. So when you imagine something or you feel something, it will release all emotions, chemicals, hormones to deal with that situation. And you've just
that's what I was going to say. And if you ruminate about things that have happened in the past that weren't good, you release all those chemicals again. You end up with high blood pressure. You end up with potentially blocking your arteries. There's all that
because stuff. Do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you do when you do that? The same as when you lust after someone or you get angry over them. You're reincarnating yourself into a time and place that no longer exists.
Yeah, I accept that. But what I'd say is, like, when you talked about let me just catch my thought. Hold on.
Yeah.
When you said before about, no, I'll leave it for the minute. It was to do with what we were saying, but it was a slight. It was just a point off the back of it. I don't know.
It'll come back
right
to
now.
you. But
Yeah. But to do with the concept of
the
nothing.
whole
So
and
have you
go on. You got something?
Yeah. So I had two things. So this is the one I remembered. Have you ever come across A Course in Miracles?
Of course.
It's called A Course in Miracles.
I know.
It's okay. So
I've been told about miracles by people.
right. So this is not it. It's fundamentally. I'm just looking for it because there's a summary of it that's literally 3 lines. And A Course in Miracles is supposedly in the 70s developed because some random lady had Jesus talk to her, and she scribed everything that he said, and ultimately it was all around being one with God, and that everything's fundamentally not real because we imagine it. The world I see is not the world you see. The you that's inside you is not the you I see. All those things you say are right. So let me just find this because it's really, really important to me, and then I'm going to have to consider the rest of our time. Hold on.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, I think we fundamentally seem to.
You're actually connected to everything,
yeah.
But also, we're also just grabbing in the dark because we don't have the full story, and humanity is going on a technological path instead of a spiritual path now, and it's all about tech, when really it should always be about the being. And this is, I think this is a message that's lost, and the same 5 elements make up everything that's living, right? And then if you want to go deeper in that, everything that's living or dead, i.e. a rock, is made up of atoms. So you are literally connected to the whole planet and even the universe.
Have you seen Avatar?
Yeah.
The film, and the bit when they're connected through the roots and the world tree and the way they all connect the physical.
Well, do you see when they connect to the animal and they put
yeah.
Well, someone said to me, "Oh, it'd be great if we were like that." And I'm like, "You are like that, just not to that extent." The trees are breathing out oxygen.
Yeah.
And you're breathing it in and you're breathing out carbon dioxide for them to build themselves. You are connected.
Stroke a dog, you both get endorphins released that make you both feel good. Yeah. So A Course in Miracles, its brief summary says, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And ultimately what it's saying is because everything is only imagined, you can't be hurt. The real you is safe, loved by you. That connection to God is inside you, all those things. I am going to have to go because otherwise the COVID people are not going to appreciate me being late.
No worries.
But I'm happy to carry on whenever. I mean, this is right up my street.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Really good fun. I enjoyed it. Thanks. It was really
cool. And then we'll look into how we can
to
find a
speak
way
to someone who's thinking.
I think my mum used to do this. I mean, my mum was a secretary, a PA, and my dad was a cigar salesman of all things. He didn't smoke himself, but he sold cigars, and he was, that sort of person. He could sell ice to Eskimos and so on. But my mum, outside of being a PA and a mum, also was into crystals and healing and energy work and cutting stones, rolling and polishing stones, seeing the beauty of them. What was the other thing? Yeah, all sorts of stuff. And she joined groups like that don't seem to exist anymore in the way they used to.
I'm going to work on finding us some people. So
I'm happy.
Problem is, if you get too big, then it's difficult for everybody to get a say. Sometimes smaller groups are better.
I agree, but I think getting too big is a nice problem to have when there's 2 of us.
That's true.
So I'm happy if you're happy to hunt people down that I think might be interested as well. I'm not trying to step in your.
Well, you're not stepping in mine. It's not my thing. It's not my thing. Don't think it's my thing.
I'm happy with an hour.
I'm just trying to do something. Honestly, the reason I'm doing this is to try and help.
Yeah, I know.
That's all I want to do.
I've long wanted to make a difference, and I know when I'm just. One of the biggest things that I've discovered through all my therapy stuff is how disconnected I've become from the universe and that's why I've grabbed my tarot cards yesterday. I mean,
I'm not very sociable. I'm not a sociable person, but I know I should be. I'm not an idiot.
No, you're not. You're not at all. An idiot. You're not overly sociable. I'm not overly sociable, which is why I find it so interesting that you and I get on as well as we do, because generally I don't give anywhere near as much of myself as I do with you. And Selena as well, for that matter. But there we go. I got to
Yes,
go.
you better
But
go. All
we will
right,
carry
Ben.
on. All
Lovely
right.
talking to you, mate.
And you as well. Take
Have
care.
a good
Love
day.
to
Say hello
everyone.
to the family, yeah?
Same back. Cheers
See
for
you,
now.
pal. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.